Welcome to Stop the Fight, episode 47. And for those of you listening who are wondering where 46 is, I forgot to upload it. Let's go! It'll happen. It'll happen now and then. We're all human. All right, let's talk about last weekend's action, shall we? Shall we talk about Xavier Martinez being upset? Well, it wasn't a huge upset, but being upset by what's his name? Robson Conceicao. Now, because I never uploaded the video, you guys didn't get my pick, and I said obviously take Robson Conceicao. He is certainly the fighter with a much better record of experience, I should say. Conceicao going in the fight was 16-1, sorry. Lone 8 knockouts. Lone loss coming by way of Oscar Valdez in a very spirited fight. I actually thought, obviously I'll never upload episode 46, but basically in there I said that I thought that he did very well against Valdez and even had a argument for winning the fight. Now that is leagues better than anything Xavier Martinez has done, including his unfortunate struggles against Claudio Marrero. Now, the casino's kind of right. Plus 100 seemed about right, or whatever it was, plus one something, whatever it was. Seemed about right, which means you slightly better than double your money. I think it was actually plus 110. You slightly better your money, and I said you can pretty much smash that bet button, obviously within reason. It's not financial advice. This is what I did. But I felt confident that Conceicao was going to win. He's the taller, lankier fighter with the better jab and more mobile. Now, obviously that was all hindsight, but let me tell you, the actual fight turned out to be a little bit different than I anticipated. I thought Conceicao won almost all the rounds. I think I only gave Xavier Martinez 3 rounds, and those are the 3 rounds that I was really trying to give Martinez. I thought you could have it as wide as 9 rounds to 1. I think that one round where Conceicao was hurt, you kind of have to give to Martinez simply because it's not about the amount of punches, it's the most telling punch or the most effective punches that should count in professional boxing. And in a round in which Xavier Martinez lands deep power shots, staggering and stumbling, Conceicao, you kind of have to give him that round. So that round, I for sure think you need to give him. So I think from 9-1 to 7-3 is about as close as it gets. It was kind of a wash. But I will tell you this much, that I thought Conceicao would box a little bit better. He was more beating up, outlanding, and outthrowing Xavier Martinez than outboxing, really. I mean, obviously, you can make the argument that it is outboxing, but he was in the danger zone the entire time. I didn't like what I was seeing from Conceicao, and I think if that was a smarter Martinez, I'm not saying Martinez beats him in a rematch or anything like that, no. But if there was a fighter that's just a little bit better than Martinez, I think he would be able to take advantage of many of the flaws that Conceicao demonstrated in the fight. Like, for instance, Conceicao threw too many combinations. Too many 3, 4, 5 punch sloppy, all hard hit combinations. And I think, what's his name? Either Bradley or Ward, I think it was Andre Ward that had mentioned it. You need to change up the power on your punches, the power and speed on your punches. That's what separates the good fighters from the great fighters, or vice versa, and the elite fighters from just the pretty good fighters. You have to. Boxing is a rhythm game. You can't everything can be a pop, 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 pop. Equal power. First of all, your opponent gets numb to it often and is just unfazed by it. Second of all, he can anticipate it. And third of all, it's much easier when you do anticipate. It's much easier to counter because you're also kind of getting exhausted. And at points, you did see Conceicao look a little winded in there. I don't know if you guys noticed that. I think he took portions of round off to breathe. Again, it was just, I didn't like what I was seeing from Conceicao. I mean, I thought he was winning pretty much every single round. And I think, I just think he fought better against Oscar Valdez. Yes, he faded a little bit, but I remember seeing a better Conceicao. Again, maybe I have to rewatch the fight. Maybe Oscar Valdez was having an off night. Although I don't think so. It seems just the straight hands of Conceicao were just doing work against Valdez. And over here, where do we go from here? I think the 130-pound division is at the very top level is dangerous, obviously, because you have Stevenson and Valdez. Burcheld, I think, yes, there was a monster knockout by Oscar Valdez, but Burcheld is a very powerful fighter. Now, I don't know for sure if the issue with Burcheld is the fact that he's just weight drained and can't do it anymore, or is it just that his chin is cracked and he's no longer the fighter he was even a few fights ago? But like I said, let's talk about the top. You got the two heads, basically, Shakur Stevenson and Oscar Valdez, two undefeated guys. Two guys that I think define the weight class. It's not particularly deep once you get out those two guys, because once you get out of those two guys, outside of Chris Colbert, who I don't know if he's got he's not at that level. He doesn't have that kind of ability, I don't think. But outside of that, once you get out of those two guys, you have a pretty noticeable drop off. And I think the division is wide open, because I think we can tell that that Shakur Stevenson is definitely going up to chase the big boys at 135. That's, like I said, the history making, the resume making, the all-time great making division in boxing right now. It's very clearly 135 pounds. So anyone in and around that weight class wants to fight those guys and wants to get a piece of that action. So I can see Shakur Stevenson absolutely going up were he to fight Oscar Valdez, and I would favor him in that fight. That's what I'm saying. I'm assuming if that fight gets made, Shakur Stevenson wins and goes up to 135 pounds. I think Oscar Valdez probably chases him in a fight in which I believe he would lose that fight, but I do not believe that he takes much damage. I know there are very differing opinions who believe that Stevenson will put it on so heavily on Valdez that he'll stop him. Maybe. I think we'd have to look at what the line is, to see if it's worth playing that. Shakur Stevenson is not really a puncher. What he did with Jamal Herring was, Jamal Herring was 2 levels slower than him. He wasn't just slower than him. He was slower than the guy who's slower than him. So it was a very huge speed disparity. I don't think Jamal Herring couldn't do anything in that fight. And it was quite apparent within the first 3 rounds. I was like, "Holy moly!" Because I think I took Herring as a play there. That was awful. Remember, guys, I know recently we've been on a string of good victories. The over in what do you call it? In the Joe Smith fight, and the 2 kind of upsets since then. So I don't want to, obviously we're kind of on a lucky streak, and we'll see how it plays this weekend, because I think I'm going for the upset again. The upset again. Yes, exactly. So again, let's recap. We took just the fights in the new year. The over 5.5 in the Joe Smith fight against Gaffard. We took Moxio against Gary Russell at plus 300. Why? Very simply, Gary Russell admitted to the fact that he was injured entering the fight. Very easy bet to make. And now we took, again, a structural, physical kind of just know the sport bet on Robinson Conceicao. People who don't watch the sport would think that this fight was even. Anyone who watched the sport would come to the same conclusions that I did, I believe. I don't. Amongst the people that I spoke to, no one really thought Xavier Martinez was going to win. The fact that he was a favorite was a little crazy, given that many people thought that, like I said, Conceicao beat Oscar Valdez, who outside of Shakur Stevenson, or even including Shakur Stevenson, is the most accomplished 130-pounder in the world right now. So, like I said, pretty easy bet for us to make. Now, let's talk about this weekend. Let's talk about Keith, one-time Thurman, against Mario Barrios. Now, where did we last see our friend Keith? Our friend Keith Thurman got himself into the record books in his previous fight. He wound up losing to a 40-something-year-old Manny Pacquiao. Losing his belt, that is. Further cementing Pacquiao's legacy as truly one of the greatest fighters to ever lace up a pair of gloves. A top 10 fighter in the history of the sport. Just a legacy. And Keith Thurman will forever be associated with that, as that was the last victory that Manny Pacquiao had, right? That was in 2019. That was 2 years ago. He is fighting against 26-1, 17 knockout Mario El Azteca Barrios, who we last saw getting stopped in the 11th round against Gervonta Davis in a very spirited effort. He did he really put up a fight against Gervonta Davis, and I think it was a little bit of like a coming out party. Even though he had lost and was finally knocked out in the fight against Gervonta Davis, I think he showed us both heart, discipline, resistance, a little bit of power. I think he had Gervonta Davis, not in trouble, but let's say kind of clenching his ass there a little bit. He was. I think Gervonta Davis was certainly had to think on his feet in the fight a little bit. So let's talk about this fight. What do we see? Now, for some reason, my DraftKings is not showing me the odds, but it seems to be plus 150 for Mario Barrios, minus 182 for Keith Thurman. Now, that seems about right. Mario Barrios has been fighting at 140 pounds and under his entire career. Now, he's young at 26. Well, I guess relatively young, right? That's relatively young for boxing. It's not super young, but it's relatively young. And Mario Barrios has had at least his past 10 fights at 140 pounds. He's never fought 147 pounds, in which this fight is taking place. This fight is taking place, guys, at 147 pounds. Keith Thurman, has only one defeat. As a matter of fact, the defeat against Manny Pacquiao is his only loss. 29-1 with 22 knockouts. Now, Keith Thurman, let's talk about something. Let's look at this kind of analytic. If I tell you that Keith Thurman's last 4 fights have been against Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Josito Lopez, and Manny Pacquiao, you think this guy is building a very, very, very strong resume. And I tell you, you're kind of right. What if I told you those have been the only 4 fights he's had in the past 6 years almost? Yes, right. He fought Sean Porter in 2016, Danny Garcia in 2017, Josito Lopez in 2019, in which he was hurt and nearly stopped himself in the middle rounds. As a matter of fact, one judge even called it a draw. And Manny Pacquiao in 2019. So that's 2 2-year breaks and 4 fights in the past 6 years since 2016. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Guys, that should be a point of concern. Keith Thurman is now 33 years old, nagging injuries. He's saying he's healthy, but you know what? Are you ever really healthy once you're in your mid-30s? He's closer to 35 than he is to 30, guys, by the way. He's had some work now. And if we look at Keith, Mr. One Time, he was one time. Early in his career, he was one time. But the Keith Thurman that fought Carlos Quintana, that fought Soto Carras, is not the same Thurman that we now see fighting Josito Lopez and Manny Pacquiao. It's not. It is not the same. It doesn't seem to be the same caliber of fighter. Certainly not the same kind of power. Now, I don't think Keith's power has diminished. I just think Keith's level of opposition has increased. And if what we know about level of opposition, the higher it goes up, unless the fighter is particularly chinny, the better they take the punch. Because as you go up in competition in boxing, you're going to get hit. So if you do not have the chin like David Price to make it in at the top level, that would have been exposed. Everyone at the top level has a level of chin, right? Until it gets cracked, of course. But they have a certain level of chin. They're not just gonna be getting knocked out left and right. It doesn't really happen. I mean, and you see with David Price, heavyweight is a different ballgame. He has lots of power, all the tools, height, strength, blah, blah, blah. He can't take a punch. The second someone breathes on David Price, he gets knocked out. Now, Keith Thurman, as he moved up the ranks, since getting the stoppage against Luis Collazo, it's been a UD against Porter, very competitive. Split decision victory over Danny Garcia, very competitive. Josito Lopez, in a fight in which he knocks down Josito, but himself was very hurt, nearly stopped in the middle rounds. Very close fight. And a close but decisive loss to Manny Pacquiao, in which he was knocked down in the first round and at points was in trouble, even though he had Manny Pacquiao himself in trouble. Again, Manny Pacquiao in his 40s in trouble. So, just saying all of that, Just telling you that Keith Thurman story. And I like Keith Thurman. Fast guy, good punches, the whole works. Just telling you all those stories about him. You should, at least as somebody who is betting, none of this financial fights with other guys. You're grown people, you make your own bets. You bet alone. Telling you the story of Keith Thurman, this Mr. One Time who became not so one time, who is now, thus he stepped up in competition, is experiencing very difficult fights. You know, I believe his last outstanding hurrah was probably against Robert Guerrero and Luis Collazo, those kind of fights. He completely shut out Robert Guerrero, knocking him down. Complete domination of a Robert Guerrero in 2015. Now, that's not the ghost of 130, 135 pounds, obviously. Everyone knows Robert Guerrero going up in weight class is a complete failure for his career, a complete mistake, and a level of hubris. You have to know, you're the ghost at 130, 135. You are nothing but a punching bag at 140 and 147 pounds. That is the truth. But nonetheless, this is a Robert Guerrero that he really outclassed in 2015, 147 pounds, stopping the Luis Collazo afterwards. I mean, no, Luis Collazo was a very decent fighter. Even 2015, he was still a decent fighter. And then come the real high level guys at 147 pounds. Sean Porras, Danny Garcia, Jose Lopez, and Manny Pacquiao. Jose Lopez is questionable, but clearly Jose Lopez has put very many good fighters in very awkward positions. So again, you don't want to underestimate him. He had, if I remember correctly, Timothy Bradley very much hurt and on the verge of stoppage. Is that Timothy Bradley that I'm thinking of? No. Sorry, guys. But he did knock out John Molina. That was a slight oversight. For a second, I thought it was, what's his name? Timothy Bradley. But I'm thinking about someone else. But Jose Lopez is, he was expected to lose that fight. It was a comeback fight. I mean, we have to talk about the opposite. Obvious. Also, Keith Thurman is injured, or he was injured. He's an injury-prone fighter. He's always saying he's getting better, the surgery, this, blah, blah, blah. But this is why he's been so inactive. That's not the only reason, but his injuries are why he's been so inactive. 2-year breaks in 2017. Remember, he's actually only fought in 2019 since 2017. He fought against Danny Garcia. Then he took 2 years off. Had 2 fights in 6 months, and then has now been off for 2 years again. Guys, ring rust is a thing. Ring rust is a thing. Now, it wasn't a thing against, what's his name, with Gary Russell. I did say, maybe ring rust. Not really. It wasn't for him. What's his name? Shakur Stevenson did mention that Gary Russell is in the gym all the time, always sparring, always fighting, always working out, so ring rust wasn't going to be an issue for him. It's going to be an issue with Keith Thurman coming in and out of surgeries, a timing kind of fighter, very much so. He needs to land his one-time shot. And here he is. And again, let's talk about now Mario Barrios. Mario Barrios he's younger. He's actually also a little bit bigger, taller guy than Keith Thurman. So I think what we're seeing in this fight is maybe a crossroads of sorts, right? Sometimes a fighter just gets better a little bit and another fighter declines a little bit, and they see each other as equals. This happens. This happens in heavyweight often. I think you can look at the Vladimir Klitschko against Anthony Joshua. After seeing the kind of fight that they had in 2017, is there really any doubt that Vladimir Klitschko in his prime would absolutely stop Anthony Joshua? Probably none. I don't think anyone here would say Anthony Joshua is a better fighter than Vladimir Klitschko. No, but what happening is Vladimir Klitschko, now pushing into his 40s, has slowed down just enough, and Anthony Joshua has gotten better just enough that he, that you had that coming of the crossroads in which one fighter got a little better, another one got a little worse, and they kind of met in the middle, and Anthony Joshua was able to survive that 7th round and come back and win by knockout in the 11th against a 40-year-old man. These kind of things happen all the time. I mean, you have it a little bit with Jean Pascal and Bernard Hopkins, or maybe even Jermaine Taylor, Bernard Hopkins, right? Where I think that's a better one because Bernard Hopkins did absolutely beat Pascal in the rematch. But Jermaine Taylor Jermaine Taylor winds up beating Hopkins, not because he's better than Hopkins. I don't think he was better than Hopkins. I think he was younger, a little bit fresher, got to his prime, and Hopkins decreased just enough where Jermaine Taylor took 2 fights off Hopkins. You know? And like I said, these things, they do happen. You just Golovkin Canelo, another perfect example. You know, they took the fight when Canelo got a little bit better, Golovkin got a little bit worse, and still we thought Golovkin won that first fight. And then the second fight, Canelo got a little bit better again, Golovkin got a little bit worse. And now I think more people will agree that Canelo probably took that second fight. But that's what you see over there. That's a similar kind of a thing. I'm trying to think what else. You have, I mean, like I said, these examples are plentiful in boxing. This will always be the case. I think eventually you're going to have something like this happen with somebody like Terrence Crawford. He'll get just a little bit worse, and then someone like Ennis will win. Not because I'm necessarily better, but one fighter got just worse enough, and another one just got better enough. With he's primed for the taking, or most people will still view the victory as legitimate, even if they. Most hardcore experts, at least hardcore fans, will at least say that, look, it was a good win, but there was a little bit of decline. And I think, with Golovkin and Canelo, that's absolutely going to be said. I think you can argue that same thing with Klitschko and Joshua, obviously Hopkins and Taylor earlier in their fights. And these kind of things happen. I think something similar, although a little bit different, with Teofimo and Loma, right? Teofimo gets a little bit better, Loma gets a little bit worse. But it's not so much Loma gets a little bit worse, he just gets undersized. So, like I said, these things happen. An aging champion. Hatton 2, right? At 140. Hatton 2. You can make the argument that Floyd De La Hoya, right? Floyd waits until De La Hoya's just past it enough at 147 and takes him, right? And Floyd just enters his prime. Was it 2007 was that fight or something like that? In many ways, for me, that fight was kind of really what turned me into a hardcore boxing fan. I really had no stake in that fight. All I knew about it was everyone knew who Oscar De La Hoya was. They didn't even watch boxing. I knew who Oscar De La Hoya was. So that was the only reason I got into that fight. But again, I am getting off track. Well, all I'm trying to say here is I think there's very good reason to believe that Mario Barrios, the bigger, younger man, with similar kind of power, who even though he lost recently, they're both coming off loss, but I think Gervonta Davis he kind of knocked him out. Not kind of, he knocked him out and he stopped him. TKO victory over Mario Barrios. Keith Thurman was only beaten by Manny Pacquiao, but Barrios is a much fresher fighter. I talk about fights since 2016, and I mentioned only 4 fights, inclusive, obviously. For Keith Thurman, if I were to count Mario Barrios, that's 1, 2, 3 in 16, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 fights in the same time. So he's had more than 3 times the level of the amount of experience as Keith Thurman has. I didn't do obviously a round count, but an experience, practice, I should say. Ring practice as Keith Thurman. And now you can make the argument that Keith Thurman is a veteran. He doesn't need that kind of ring practice. And you'll probably be right. But I think, if you're asking me what I'm doing this weekend, Mario Barrios. I'm putting my money on Mario Barrios. And that is my plan. Well, all right, guys. Like I said, I'm sorry I didn't put up last week's episode, but here we are. Got another one for you. We'll talk about it after this weekend, and it's over!